The American Civil War. It's a conflict that really forged the modern United States, but it came at a terrible cost. Brother fighting brother. So let's dive in and figure out how this tragic and totally pivotal moment in American history actually happened.
I mean, that's the big question, right? In 1860, we're one country. Just 5 years later, more than 600,000 soldiers are dead. How on earth does a nation do that to itself? It's not just about battles and generals. It's about how a young republic could completely unravel. To really get it, we have to look at the chain of events that pushed everything right to the breaking point.
You know, the path to war wasn't just one single moment. It was more like a cascade of crises, one right after another. It was a raid, a completely broken election, and a core idea about what America was that literally tore the nation in two.
So, first things first, we've got to get a feel for the atmosphere in those years right before the war. The whole country was basically a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
Just take a look at this timeline. It's wild. In a little over a year, the country goes from just simmering tensions to outright dissolving. And it all really kicks into high gear in 1859 with a guy named John Brown.
Now, John Brown was a fiery abolitionist. He was absolutely convinced that the only way to end slavery was through violent insurrection. So he and his followers, they attack a federal armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. The plan? Seize all the weapons and spark a massive slave rebellion. But the plan failed, spectacularly, and Brown was captured.
And here's where you can really see the massive divide in the country. It was like two different Americas living side by side. To many in the North, John Brown was a hero, a martyr who died for the most righteous cause imaginable. But in the South, he was a terrorist. He was terrifying proof that the North was bent on destroying their entire way of life with violence. There was just no middle ground anymore.
And of course, a divide that deep, it's not going to stay out of politics for long. It was only a matter of time before it triggered a complete and total breakdown of the political system.
All right, so the 1860 election, this was the final straw. The Democratic Party was really the only political party left that had a national reach, and it just completely shattered over the issue of slavery. They couldn't agree, so they ended up running two candidates, one for the North, one for the South. This split their vote, and it paved the way for the Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln to win. And here's the kicker. Lincoln won the presidency without being on the ballot in 10 southern states. He won without a single southern electoral vote.
For the southern states, Lincoln's victory was, well, it was a catastrophe. It was a signal that they had lost any and all political power in the country. They genuinely believed that they were now a permanent minority in a government that was openly hostile to their entire society and economy.
And so that's exactly what they did. Starting with South Carolina in December of 1860, one by one, they left the Union. And in their view, they were just following the example of the Founding Fathers in 1776, dissolving political ties that they now saw as oppressive.
So the Union is broken. Both sides are now gearing up for a fight that almost everyone thought would be over in like a few months. Boy, were they wrong.
And this is where it all kicks off. April 12, 1861. Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter, which was a U.S. federal fort right in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Lincoln had tried to send supplies to the fort, and the new Confederacy saw that as an act of aggression. And with those first shots, the Civil War had begun.
Okay, so you look at the stats, right? On paper, the North should have wrapped this up in no time. They had more people, way more money, more factories, more railroads, everything. So why did this thing drag on for 4 brutal years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives?
And this table here, it really lays it all out. Yeah, the Union had all the industrial might and a bigger population, but the Confederacy had some serious advantages of its own. Look, they didn't have to conquer the North. They just had to defend their own turf and not lose. Fighting a defensive war with, frankly, better generals like Robert E. Lee and a population fired up about fighting for their independence, that's a really powerful combination.
For the first couple of years, you've got the Confederacy's superior military leadership often giving them the edge. They were winning a lot of the major battles. But then, in 1862, things start to shift. And it gets ugly.
In September of 1862, you have the Battle of Antietam in Maryland. In just 12 hours of fighting, there were more than 22,000 casualties. Think about that for a second. It is still the single bloodiest day in the history of the United States. Just a horrifying look at the sheer scale of this war.
Now this battle, it wasn't some knockout punch for the Union. Robert E. Lee's invasion of the North was stopped, but his army escaped. Still, it was just enough of a victory. Lincoln had been waiting for some good news from the battlefield to make a move that would change everything.
And just 5 days after that bloody battle, Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. This was a total game changer. It transformed the entire conflict. Suddenly, this wasn't just a war to hold the country together anymore. Now, it was a war to end slavery. This gave the Union a powerful moral high ground and basically killed any chance the Confederacy had of getting help from anti-slavery countries like Great Britain.
Then comes 1863, and wow, this is the year it all really flips. In July, you get two massive Union victories happening at almost the exact same time. First, Lee's army is defeated at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. This is his last big gamble to invade the North, and it fails. At the same time, way out west, General Ulysses S. Grant captures the fortress city of Vicksburg. This gives the Union total control of the Mississippi River and literally cuts the Confederacy in half.
So after Gettysburg and Vicksburg, it's pretty much a different war. The Confederacy is now permanently on the defensive, and really, its fate is sealed by the North's overwhelming resources and these huge strategic wins.
Now, the war did rage on for almost 2 more years, but the Confederacy was just slowly and methodically ground down. Remember all those advantages the Union had? The factories, the manpower? They finally just wore the South down. Unable to replace their losses, the main Confederate armies surrendered in April of 1865. The war was over.
So what did all this bloodshed actually settle? Well, it answered the biggest questions that had been hanging over the country since it was founded. First, secession is illegal. The Union can't be broken. Second, the United States is one single nation, not just a loose collection of states. And most importantly, with the 13th Amendment, the institution of slavery was finally and forever destroyed.
And with the end in sight, Lincoln wasn't thinking about punishment. He was thinking about healing. In his second inaugural address, just a month before the end, he talked about his vision for a merciful reunion, about binding up the nation's wounds. It was a vision that would try to guide the incredibly difficult years of Reconstruction to come.
So the Civil War really did forge a new United States. It settled these huge existential questions about whether the country could even survive. But in doing so, it opened up a whole new set of questions. What would freedom and citizenship actually mean for millions of newly freed African Americans? Answering that question, well, that would be the next great, painful chapter in the American story.